Welcome back to you all, and to our last two sessions at this conference, which will be bringing us up close to the insurance industry and the important role it plays in supporting supply chain resilience. So without further ado, let me hand over to our moderator for this next session, Bjorn Hartong, Global Head of Marine and Supply Chain at Zurich, and of course, a member of the TAPA EMEA Advisory Board. Bjorn, let me hand over to you, and I know that you will introduce our panel of experts.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks. So, good afternoon, everybody. This is one of the last sessions, so I hope you survive. You've made it so far, let's put it that way. Look at it positively. So, we've been asked with a few people which are experts in insurance to share some light on some questions that people have regarding insurance, and that it actually covers all the costs, or not. So I'm lucky to have a few people joining me on stage. So I start with Mike Yarwood. They will all introduce themselves. Thomas Sien, Eric de Schmidt, and Ben Zuid. So Mike, if you could kick it off by telling...
No worries, thank you very much. So Mike Yarwood from TT Club, based in London, and Managing Director Loss Prevention. My background and early career was in road freight and freight forwarding, logistics. So over my career, I have experienced both good and bad, both sides of the fence. So a unique view in some ways. TT Club, for those in the audience who are not familiar with us, are a liability insurer specializing in global freight and logistics companies. In the context of today, we insure thousands of freight forwarders and logistics operations around the world. But in addition, we also insure some of the largest ports and terminals globally, and around 80% of the global container fleet, which is our heritage and background. So, pass the floor to Thomas.
Hi, my name is Thomas Sien. I work for KA Insurance in Cologne, Germany. We started our business in 2007 as a 100% subsidiary of Munich Re Group, and came into the family of Ergo as an insurance company in 2016, and we are dealing with industrial marine risks. I'm the risk manager, or one of two risk managers, and my background is I started my work career in 1979 as becoming ABC man. I received my captain's license worldwide in 1988, and I quit the sea after 11 years and joined the insurance industry as risk manager, working all over in the world and enjoying to recommend loss prevention methods in all kinds of marine business for our clients and ourselves.
Good afternoon, my name is Eric de Smet. I am a lawyer from education, and I've been working in shipping and marine insurance all my career. I represent Baloise Insurance, an insurance company also active in marine and transport insurance, but also today IUMI, which is the International Union of Marine Insurers, a global organization of national organizations grouping all insurance companies active in the marine insurance field, both in hull, liability, cargo insurance, and energy.
Hello, I'm Ben Zuid. I'm the Regional Head of Security for Reckitt, Europe, Middle East and Africa. So I'm on the back end of the insurance parties. So we're the ones who always ask insurance to get our value back. And I will bring the perspective of the manufacturer, the owner of the product, in case of a theft, and based on that. Nobody most likely knows Reckitt. Everybody knows our products, Dettol, Airwick, Strepsils, Durex. So we are like Unilever, Procter & Gamble. That's the wrong one, should have been Dettol. No, just kidding. But we are, let's say, a producer with a holding name, which is Reckitt. And we're a 200-year-old company, and interesting to work for.
Okay, great. Well, Ben, let's start with you then. Looking at, everybody's always asking about what's now the real cost of loss. Do you have an example? And by talking about the example, who would be the stakeholders which you need to build your example of the real cost of loss?
Yeah, so good question, thank you for that. Chatham House rules, just to be sure on that one. I will not go into too much specifics, but just to be careful on that one. So I will just make one example on where the real cost of a loss is for us. So I think 2 years ago, we lost one container. And we're like, okay, this can happen. It was organized crime, so we did the full investigation, not only us, but there were also 4 other containers that were stolen at that site. And I did a deep dive into, okay, what is the real cost? So we looked at the insurance, which is just the basic cost. It was, let's say, 150,000, just making it up. So I then went into the organization to say, okay, but what is the real impact? So I went to my sales organization, how much is the value of this product into the market? Which of course is much bigger. Then the sales organization came back to me, they said, hey, but Ben, we're seeing a spike, a negative spike in the sale of this product, because the product is still getting into the market. I'm like, okay, what is the impact on that one? Then I went to supply, and I said, okay, what is the impact for us? Again, it was reproducing the products. It was shipping them again from the other side of the world to our side. We could not bring it into the market, so there was a lot of pressure on supply. And of course, the fourth one is the reputational risk. So there was a high potential that this would have been used in the criminal circuit, which we knew for sure when we 2 years later found the product. So this is an example that the total loss was about, and I heard somebody say 4 or 5 times. For us, it was even bigger. If you calculated everything, it was about 6 to 7 times the value that was just the manufacturing cost. And this is how I work together with supply, with sales, with legal, with the insurance company, with the transporter, with everybody in between to find out what happened. So our loss was really much bigger than simple to say, okay, this is the cost of insurance.
Okay, thanks, Ben. Mike, referring to you, so what other aspects should freight forwarders or shippers consider when there is a cost of loss? I mean, besides the fact that Ben wants his money from the insurance company as internal costs.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating to hear that sort of real-life example of, you know, the wider scope of costs when cargo does get stolen, unfortunately. But I think from the freight and logistics operators' perspective, there are some direct and other more indirect, maybe less tangible costs involved. Torsten mentioned yesterday the deductible, the policy deductible. That comes straight off the bottom line in most instances. There's then increased insurance premiums if you have a poor insurance record and a poor loss record. Often there will be investigation costs into the incident, what happened, legal costs to either bring a claim against your logistics operator or your subcontractor, or to defend the claim if the claim's brought by the beneficial cargo owner. And I've seen instances over the last couple of years where those costs have run into 6 figures, you know, for multiple stakeholders. So really huge indirect costs. There's reputational damage for the logistics operator. You know, again, if you have a very strong name in the industry, or you're a SME looking to, you know, to expand, having a reputation as being, you know, an operator who has a poor loss record can be really damaging and really costly. And again, a less tangible cost. One aspect that I've discussed with a couple of people over the last couple of days is around the driving workforce as well. And this is another sort of less tangible consideration for logistics operators. But it's acknowledged that there's a huge shortage of drivers across Europe and across the world. I remember back in my earlier career undertaking a study, and the average age of our 300-strong driving workforce was 56. You know, most of those guys now will have retired. But bringing and attracting youngsters and younger people into the industry of truck driving, it's just not an attractive proposition anymore. Coupled that challenge with the ever-increasing seemingly threat of freight crime, being attacked, there were stories yesterday and again today about more violent crime, it really doesn't help attracting people into the industry to drive the trucks that we rely on. And then maybe taking another sort of sideways step for logistics operators to be aware of. In Dan's presentation this morning, he sort of emphasized the need and the increasing demand of BCOs, beneficial cargo owners, for transparency through the supply chain. They have a reputation to protect too. Ben kind of alluded to that just now. they can't afford to be associated with cargo being lost and stolen through the supply chain. There's all sorts of ramifications from a reputational perspective. The value of the product, customer satisfaction, and the reliance and confidence that they have in the product. And this, again, I've seen firsthand transpire through to when it comes to retendering for the contract. The logistics operator has dropped out, that they're not considered for that particular contract anymore. So lots of different things going on there, I think, yeah.
Okay, great, thanks. Eric, just linking it more from an IUMI point of view, what's the holistic view that IUMI has on insurance? Because all the insurance companies actually are a member of IUMI, so.
Well, thank you. Well, IUMI, of course, is a body representing the insurance industry, but we also have close contacts with all the stakeholders we work for, our clients, etc., and also some governments and bodies, legislatures. What we try to do in this field on road haulage and security and theft prevention is, of course, assemble ideas, prevention tips, and hold conferences. But the most important thing we try to do is we have several commissions. One of them is the Policy Forum. And Policy Forum has drafted quite a number of issues that are important for the insurance industry, shipping, etc. And including one of them is, of course, road haulage, safety, and theft prevention. In that sense, we also have associated with TAPA, because my personal feeling is, after rendering some speeches and attending meetings with European Commissions, etc., that legislation and funds might be available for instance, safe parkings on the main European motorways. But we feel that self-organization and responsibility with the stakeholders themselves, the freight forwarders, the cargo interests, etc., is so much important. And that's where TAPA comes in, by assembling and creating this bond and offering tools which are more concrete and much more practical than, let's say, politicians or legislation can make. That's a very important point. And IUMI is, of course, supporting that, because it's in everybody's interest to see criminal figures, thefts going down. We know it's not the case. Another point I want to raise is that legislation and funding for public parking lots and some private public participation, it's very good. But I want to ask the question, if somebody could tell us what the freight fraud on the platforms could prevent, because that's a major problem. It's been dealt with during this conference, and we know from our personal experience that privacy in social media is very important. There can be misuse of those platforms, and we see them happening frequently. And I wonder if some kind of legislation can come into place to render the organizations of the platforms more liable to take care. We, of course, can share tips and can advise to check every personal company which appears on the platform, and we advise our clients to double check and to make freight forward contracts with reliable partners. But we also know that there's time pressure, there is shortage of haulage sometimes, so it is easy to step into the net of the not bona fide freight forwarders handling or acting on those platforms. And I think some proper check and liability should lie with those who organize it. Not only for us to check it all, or the clients, but also to have some kind of legislation to prevent this from happening.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thanks. Looking more into the practical side, Thomas, any update on recent things in the supply chain? Have we seen lots of changes? Are the customers aware of the changes, the risks in the supply chain world? I know you come about a lot in ports and terminals.
Yeah, my impression is that customers are very much aware about the situation nowadays. Sometimes they are even better informed than we are in regard to stocking of vessels, containers, delays during air transportation. That means cargo will stay outside on the apron, and maybe it's not enough packed or not good enough packed, and nobody knows where the cargo is. And but in general, I think we always have to face the problem to talk to the right people, as everybody knows from life experience. But if you are talking to them, my impression really is they are very much aware about the situation right now.
Okay. Which is good.
Of course, yeah.
Okay, great. Ben, just coming back to your supply chain, not referring to any product in particular, what's the flavor of the month? I mean, do they like to steal anything? And do you have different programs per product? I mean, would they like to steal one product more than the other?
Yes, so there is, unfortunately, with the majority of our products, it's easy sellable. So criminals are like, they don't care, because if you steal a bottle of Dettol, it's easy to sell. Same with Finish and Vanish, the dishwashing tablets. The one where we take additional security measures is, of course, our infant formula one, because we produce for the kids that really need it, so lactose intolerant and these things, so we're really secure on that one, making sure that the product goes to the baby that's in need, especially now with the current situation in the US, for example, that was also mentioned today. We have additional layers of security on that one, and also our vitamins and mineral section. And of course, as you can imagine, Durex is one of the products that is, I think, in the top 10 of most counterfeited products in the world. We also do additional security on that one, but unfortunately, we have about 100,000 shipments a year in Europe. So it's really more about, okay, what are the risky countries where we do additional security, or where we know there is a hotspot, for example, in the UK, we do some additional checks. And also in South Africa, almost our loads from the main warehouse to the international countries next to South Africa, they are escorted, even when it's just a Dettol load. Yeah, just to be sure that we don't get the blue light robberies and these things. So it's a little bit a mix of all. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, I think it would be expected. It also helps if you insured on your production value, because then you have more risk, so you are more engaged in building up your supply chain. Mike, do you see a link between the potential impact of the current situation and the cost of living, so that people would be more interested in?
Yeah, I think maybe just echoing some of Ben's thoughts there, we saw in terms of the commodities being stolen a real sort of shift through 2020 as the pandemic took hold, and again as the cost of living takes shape and increases. Criminals operate almost legitimate business in terms of market forces. So the organised criminals at least tend not to steal cargo that they can't move on fairly quickly. So the trends shift with market forces. In early 2020, we saw a shift away from items that you might describe as luxury, so laptops, that electronics, those kind of things, and a switch almost overnight towards medical supplies and things that weren't really on anyone's agenda as theft attractive, face masks, antibacterial gel, as demand increased. So yeah, very much so. And then in the context of sort of the cost of living increases, so the insider threat was mentioned several times throughout the conference over the last 2 days. And as people's cost of living is squeezed, as their day-to-day lives become more complicated, there is, I think, an increased propensity for recruitment as an insider, which again creates risk right across the board of the supply chain, whether it be logistics operators, shippers, and right across the board.
Right. Ben?
Yeah, can I add one thing?
Sure.
It's also what we saw during several investigations. It's that it's A, organized crime, but B, also organized retail. They have a gray market. So they have, let's say, 50% is officially bought, then the other 50% is officially stolen. So if you do an investigation, you first have to deep dive what is real, what is not real. And there was a big investigation in the UK where it was really a big organization. Also in South Africa, we saw that there is big organizations not only from the theft perspective, but also from the resale perspective. Those are working together, which is also creating a risk from the supply chain perspective, because you don't know what is a legit load or what is a legit load. Yeah.
Okay, well, bringing it back to insurance, that means that that's all not insured. And I think a lot of people forget, maybe shipping companies or producing companies, that everything of the side effects of having a freight stolen is not insurable. You can't insure it under a marine insurance policy, and well, there's basically not much else you can pick from in our menu. But Eric, do you think that the insurance company knows all the losses that happen? Are they already being reported to insurance companies?
Well, of course, there might be a misconception about marine of cargo insurance. Cargo insurance, of course, will not pick up consequential losses like loss of market, reputation damages, business interruption, things like that. We insure and compensate for the actual value of the loss, the cargo value. Are there other misconceptions? Yes. We sometimes have clients who say, well, I don't need insurance for my cargo being trucked because there is the liability of the freight forwarder or the trucking company. Well, yes and no. Of course, we all know that there is legislation, CMR, for instance, but that's limiting. Not all losses or thefts will be covered by the freight forwarder or his insurance or the road haulage company. And even when they are, there is a limitation on the value. So when you have a high value and a low weight, the compensation will be minimal compared to the actual value of the loss, not even taking in consideration all the consequential losses that were mentioned earlier. So it's very important to have this insurance. Cargo insurance will step in, compensate, and try to recover, of course, from the freight forwarder or the road haulier if he can be held liable. So there's very important aspects of insurance that people should know about.
Yeah, so from my point to add, we also have, so internally within customers, it's also not fully aware what they lose. Some senior management decides to hide the loss, so they send a credit invoice to their customer, hoping the customer won't complain and the loss is gone, or at least it's not officially noted. So sometimes people become creative. Of course, companies have their own deductible, which means anything in their own deductible, they don't inform the insurance company. They don't have to. It's their own risk. So if you think that insurance companies know it all, no, sorry, we don't. Absolutely not. Right. So, Thomas, if you see the current changes, what do you think the role of procurement in supply chain security should be? Because currently we see a lot of supply chains which are filling up. So the answer of making a supply chain more reliable is just we fill more warehouses with stuff. What should procurement do? How should they react or discuss with insurance and security?
What we realize at the moment is that our clients, the big industry companies, they look for different options. For example, going to China or buying something from China here, everybody knows that there is no shipping line going in a normal sequence and in a normal frequency. And clients, they search, for example, or discussing about taking into consideration the China train again. And we have different experiences concerning the China train, for example, going more north, going more south, going via Turkey, and we are dealing with these kind of options, and our job is actually to get a transparency in regard to our risk for us, for our client, and then so we are talking among each other and trying to find the best solution at the end of the day.
Good. I recently had a meeting with a customer, and they said our procurement is looking for a new warehouse, and they used the square meter rate of 4 years ago, and it shouldn't be much more expensive. I said, well, good luck. The warehouses 4 years ago were relatively cheap because there was a lot of empty warehouses, and since the prices have gone up. So by the time you rent something per square meter now with the price from 4 years ago, you probably end up with a chicken shed with no security, and luckily it has a roof on it. So, from my point of view, I think supply chain and insurance should be more involved, also in procurement. Maybe even have a veto right. I'm not quite sure if we will go that far. Right. But Mike, anything else which is being targeted, maybe besides the stuff we normally need?
Yeah, I mean, maybe just to elaborate a little bit on the supply chain crisis, the effects of COVID-19 pandemic over the last 2 years has meant that, we've seen congestion all around the world, whether it be at ports and terminals, peaks in volumes, demands on trucking, warehousing, as you just mentioned there. And to coin a phrase, cargo at rest is at risk. We're seeing lots of pinch points. We've experienced lots of pinch points over the last 2 years. And procurement, again, linking back there to, temporary warehousing, there just isn't the good quality temporary warehousing capacity available. So people are taking sort of risks, but really trying to risk assess those decisions is vital. We've also seen sort of trends, theft from trucks at unsecure parking locations. Again, there's been a trend over the last 2 days, but we've experienced in our data an increase in theft from facilities. So warehouses, trucking depots, where entire trailer loads are being targeted. Again, perhaps with insider involvement. But also then a minor shift towards other modes. So rail, historically, in my experience, has been really secure. Very rarely do we see theft from rail, but over the last 12 months, we had some very widely distributed stories in the mainstream media in Los Angeles and in the US earlier in the year, but also in different countries across Europe. And again, criminals are constantly monitoring activity. The last thing anyone in the room should do is underestimate their capabilities. A comment Ben made earlier about the logistics of behind the criminal activity. You can't steal 20 pallets of cargo without a truck and without a network and somewhere to put it. So don't underestimate how sophisticated these operations are. And you take your eye off the ball for a second in terms of security, and you will unfortunately, find out the hard way, I would think.
Okay. Right. Ben, just linking back to you. So, is it your task to raise security and drive resilience in the supply chain, or is it something which should be a team effort?
It's always a team effort. That's why I'm absolutely against any veto right. Or anything like that. The only thing we should do, and this is the challenge that I have, and one of my colleagues is also here, we are pretty new to the organization. And it's procurement who's currently doing a lot of things because that's their job. The only thing we need to do is to educate procurement, but also the supply chain organization on what's going on. It's always a combined effort because I'm an advisor consultant. I'm not the police officer of the business. Everything you want is possible. But what you don't know, you don't know. So I'm the risk mitigator. I will tell you where the risks are. In the end, it's the business who can decide. If they want to use the warehouse, which is a chicken shed, the only thing I can say, you might reconsider because these are the risks in the area. But it's up to the business to decide. And never say, I told you so. No, it's always a team effort. I think that's the most important. Never, ever think in silos. It's always a team effort because you need them and they need you. Just make sure that you're the business enabler instead of the police officer, at least in my role.
Okay. Eric, so how can we then raise awareness of these risks with the insurance managers that buy the insurance, but also make sure it gets a bit further inside the companies that we insure?
Well, we work with experts, we work with storage surveyors, we work with specialized criminal investigations, and raising awareness, in fact, is, well, what TAPAI is doing, what we all do, and try to say what can go wrong. And I'm always very astonished that basic things in the supply chain don't work. There's been a very major progress in technique, in security devices, but criminals tend to be a step beyond that or before that. And recently an inspection was held in Zeebrugge port, and 8 out of 10 trucks had some kind of defect. overloaded, not respecting the resting time, a driver without a proper license, you name it. So that's astonishing, with all the effort and all the legislation and all the regulations and all the controls and all the security which is available, that it's still happening every day. And that's something, how can we raise awareness even more? I don't know.
So, Eric, again, do you think that an insurance company, what's actually the scope? Are we in there for the short-term or the long-term improvement?
Well, both, I would say. When you have a client with a certain claim, you try to deal with it and you give some prevention tips, or the surveyor can do that. But on the long term, you should work with partnerships and insist with the clients that those have reliable partners as well, and take security and risk assessment serious in their day-to-day business, because that's the only way on the long term that will help. And it's both, I think.
Great. Mike, just coming to you, what do you see as a future trend? How will it look like in a year, and what would be the role of insurance?
Sure. I mean, the first thing maybe in that context is, and again it's been sort of mentioned and muted several times over the last day and a half, is that freight crime isn't going away. You know, all the things that we're seeing in the industry and society are all leading down one path, which is seemingly more targeted efforts from more organised criminals, and an increase in cargo theft. The insider threat, I think, is again one that we will see more and more of. I think in our data for 2021, we estimated around 15% of all cargo theft crimes had some insider involvement or other. And fraud, again, we've had some successful partnerships with TAPA, with ILIA Impact. And the more you look into activity and freight crime, the more fraud is being employed. You know, I remember back in my early career, a lot of the theft was opportunistic. It was people physically going to the trailer and cutting a hole in the side of the curtain, and either finding something they wanted or not. That's not the case nowadays. In many instances, it's very targeted. The criminals know what they want, where it is at any given time. So they're becoming more and more sophisticated. There was a story I heard in the UK recently where they'd gone as far as recruiting an insider in a distribution centre and actually deployed a GPS tracking device on the trailer, target trailer. So the criminals had a GPS signal as to where the trailer was going, when it was going to be stopped, where it was going to be stopped. So, yeah. And
that works.
Yeah. Making their own life very easy. Yeah.
Right, Thomas, just before the conference, we were talking about a new trend of products which we see being targeted.
Yes. We also have a big client, a company producing leisure vehicle like all the Dutch guys have, the caravan or the mobile homes. And we see a trend over there, same as what Jan said this morning. Criminals are targeting the injection valves of the motorhomes. So they are coming during the weekend when the big dealers, they have about 200, 300 cars open, and there are only the student guys opening up the cars, the motorhomes in the morning, and then the crooks, they come during daytime, they sit inside the motorhome, open the booth or the way how to the front part of the car where the engine is, and they're going from car to car, and after they opened, let's say 50, 60, 70 cars, they return home, and they come back during nighttime when the dealer has closed everything, and the student coming back with a remote control and closing all the motorhomes. And during nighttime, they come back, they simply open up, and they steal the injection valves without damaging, without breaking through the doors or through the windows. And we realize such things very often all over in Germany. And the question always is, what do they do with it? And if you ask the police, they say, oh, everything going to Eastern Europe, or no idea.
Come to think of that, we also see a trend now, and it's the theft of precious metals. We've seen a lot of thefts in precious metals, I think, in the last year and a half. So precious metals, everybody thinks of gold and silver. These are mainly used for, say, jewelry, but they also have platinum or things which are in the platinum group. So they're basically in your catalyst in your car. But they're also used in the industrial production process. The negative thing of industrial production process is they don't really understand the word security. So they store multi-million-dollar values of precious metals in a basic warehouse. We've seen a lot of these gone missing in the last few years. And the actual loss is the insured value, because that's already several millions. However, these are raw materials for the customers. They need that to build their end product, which is giving them multiple million-dollar profits. No precious metal means you don't make a product. You can't just go to the do-it-yourself shop and buy a few more kilos of these precious metals. The name says precious, and it's rare earth metal, so you can't just find a few kilos of iridium on the Hornbach shelf. So you have to order it somewhere else, and sometimes that takes a few months, which means your production holds. Again, a consequence of loss, which is not insured. So Ben, what do you see as coming back to the future trend? Is there anything which is maybe more desirable from your products?
No, I think it will, to be honest, it will stay the same as it is. We're now into a new era, so the Dettols and the Lysols will stay the same. Our products will stay the same, so I don't think there's an increase in that. The only thing you will see is that it will be more sophisticated, as we also heard here, more from DCs and warehouses, more organized. And of course, yeah, the supply chains are getting longer. We have some difficult countries in between. I don't see a real trend in product, but it's more about the modus operandi. That will change. And also the mindset of people. So luckily now within our organization, we can prove that we have an issue, which took us 3 years because everybody's like, yeah, it's just one truck.
Yeah, I know you made the comment, if there's still more condoms, they're not being used, you sell more baby formula. But
yeah, marketing was not really aligned with that one, but yeah, I saw a marketing opportunity. If you don't use that, you need that. But that's no, but indeed you will see. But also from an infant formula perspective, that many people don't know, it's not only that they steal the infant formula for the use for the children or to resell. No, drug cartels use our product, so the infant formula, to cut up cocaine. Why? They want to safeguard their users. So they don't use chemicals. They better use the best product there is, which is infant formula, to cut up your cocaine. So you safeguard your users from using even more, and you make a profit out of that. So that's also what we see when they steal infant formula, which is a lot of people don't think about, but yeah.
Thanks for the business case.
Yeah,
Eric, you had a comment.
Yes, more a helicopter view. We've seen, of course, due to the pandemic and other circumstances, some disruption in logistics. It's quite important nowadays. And what I think will be a trend is that more and more just-in-time delivery will change to much more warehousing and keeping stocks around the globe and production centers. And this, of course, will, for insurers, increase the risks.
Yes.
We all know that when cargo is moving, it's less vulnerable than when it's staying somewhere. And that's something I wanted to raise. I think in the coming years we will see this type of warehouse theft and other storage issues being predominantly.
Okay, well, good. That's a sales argument to step into the FSR for certain companies. Looking at the time, I would like to open the floor for questions if there are any. Just raise your hand, and you can't see much from here, but yeah.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Caroline Naumann from Control Risks. This might be a question for Eric or Mike. I've been thinking about the idea of quantifying prevention, and I think it would be interesting to hear your perspectives about how to go about that in more of a revolutionary way, from the perspective of a security department looking to be, in the words of Torsten, moving from a cost center to a profit center.
Okay, maybe. Start at least by taking that. I think quantifying the impact that we have as a loss prevention team, whether it be at TT Club, Zurich or anywhere, is really quite difficult. Again, having sat in the shoes of a logistics provider in years gone by, again, it's quite a challenging conversation to have with the CFO and with finance department to try and invest in offsetting. I think maybe before I came into the insurance industry, I saw almost the need to suffer a large loss to justify the spend. I don't think necessarily that rings true with every organisation, but it is a really difficult, it's a good question, it's a really difficult, a really difficult aspect, I think, to overcome.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. It's a very good question, but a difficult answer. When you have a long-term relationship with a certain client who has a very regular trade of the same products in the same logistics, you can, of course, try to quantify the number of the impact of risk assessment and prevention, theft prevention, etc. But in a general way, it's rather a difficult task. But on a case-by-case basis, it could be done. Some kind of quantification, right?
Ben, you had it?
Yeah, because I think from my role, it's easy to talk to the board and also the CFO to quantify the impact that it has. And that's my initial talk is I take everything into account, and this one was really like to go back to supply and told them, I said, if you would have given me 100,000 to implement the security program, which you didn't want, the loss would have been 0. And I was really being a little bit arrogant at that stage to say, I could have prevented this loss. Some you cannot. But I think it's up to the security managers, because we are not cost centers. We are business enablers, and our expertise is risk mitigation. As long as you are always in that seat and always explain that in that way, then you will have that seat at the table. Still, of course, you will have budgets and these things, but you can quantify what you lose or what you prevented being lost. For example, in Mexico, we could save 400,000 on insurance by adding some security, which only costed 200,000. So we saved 200,000 for the company, and we had 0 losses. With insurance, we still had 20 losses. So I think it's quantifiable. The only thing is that you have to think as a businessman, woman, and not as a security professional. So turn around and go back to the organization, what is their need, and then work from there. Yeah. So I think it's quantifiable. It's only a challenge on how to bring it.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions? I see, raised hand there.
Yes.
Hello, Anthony McAndrew from Spinnaker International. I just want to pick up on the same theme from the previous question, in fact. There is a narrative that says that if an organization hardens its security arrangements, there is more specifically a benefit, perhaps commercially, in the insurance arrangements that they have going forward, and that over a period of time you can actually see a justification for that hardening, which is a little bit distinct from the example that Ben just gave. Are there any examples that the panel can give to illustrate how that happens in reality?
Yeah, I could do one. We had a customer that had lots of losses, and basically they were looking at a rate increase for their insurance premium, which they got in the first year. And then they said, how can we mitigate it, because we don't want another increase? And we basically, as Ben told them, we told them you have to look at it from a whole company point of view, and somewhere you have to invest money. Either you give it to us, and in the end of the year we're still upset because you get more from us than you give us, which we don't like, or you invest it in security. And they did that, but that's an insurance thing, so it takes 2 to 3 years before we get proof that the system works. And then they had benefits that they could transport more value per transport, which cut their logistics cost, and they had a different security setup which was cheaper, and we cut the rates. So it does work, but the insurance, it's not that, okay, I buy a fence, it cost me 40,000, now deduct me 40,000 from my insurance policy. That would be a bit, we're not that short term. But yeah, you could gain benefits. And we've also, in that case, we've given the customers, listen, you have to go back to your senior management and explain them what you've done 4 years ago has actually paid off, less losses, less insurance premium. So end of the year, you need a bonus because you did a good job.
Yeah, just a small thing on that one. I think that's also up to the security managers to speak to the insurance managers, to have a seat at the table. When the insurance comes by, let us, as the experts, sit in, to listen in and explain, okay, but this is how we've done it. It's the same with all policy. You can never be 100% compliant with the policy. But if I have a good story behind it and we can prove it, insurance will say, okay, this is also, it's the same, but in a different manner. I think that's also up to us as security managers to be present and to explain that to insurance, to be that subject matter expert from both levels. Yeah.
Okay.
Of course, the better you present your case to your insurance on prevention, the better your quality of cover and your pricing will be, of course. It's as easy as that. Yeah. But I can give a counterexample, if I may.
Yeah, sure.
We insure a company in recycling precious metals and things like that. And there were some thefts and occasional small packages, but high value losing in freight forward situations, fast delivery and things like that. And they introduced a program, and one of the things was that they wanted to ship these high value goods like diamonds and gold were secured, and they did. But the effect was that their cargo was stolen together with a big lot of diamonds because it was specifically targeted, not their cargo, but the diamonds. And some of the diamonds were recovered, but none of their product was ever found again. So it's not to say that you don't have to do the prevention, but it's not always working like that because thefts and criminal organizations target certain traffic, certain products.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, we have to cut it off now.
Just one
sorry.
more.
I was just going to say, there's one more question.
One more question, please. My name is Jörg Stocking. I'm from the Bayer company, and I will bring the topic from Eric. So when you have a high value transportation, so do you as an insurance company have special requirements and processes with your customers so that he have to come to you and say, so there's a high value transportation, and then you say, okay, you have to do 0.132 for the security?
Yes, of course, that can happen. If you have a regular client having a certain cover limit in cargo value and exceeding that for specific reasons, they will have to come to us, and then eventual prevention measures can be introduced. It's mainly done in storage, long-term storage, to prevent misappropriation and other fraud claims, the quality of the storage, etc. Contractual arrangements they make, screening of legal contracts, things like that. In our company, I mean, maybe other companies have a more in-depth approach, maybe with TT Club, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, I think we view the relationship we have with our members as more of a partnership. You know, the expectation is that there's open dialogue back and forth. We understand the risk being presented as well as the company shipping the goods. So really an open dialogue, I think, and collaborating across there. I scribbled down earlier on, no surprises. The last thing you or anybody wants is a loss to happen and to find out that cover isn't there, you know, because it's high value, because it's a specific commodity. So I would really encourage open dialogue as
I also think the big advantage we as insurer we have a lot of experience, and we have a nice tool, what was shown previously, and we all have a lot of experience in regard what can happen and what can be done against it. Starts with the right service provider, selecting the route, selecting the right car, and all these stuff has to be discussed at least together with the client in order to convince him or to say, okay, you can do whatever you want, but at the end of the day, the maximum what we will cover is, let's say, maybe 5 million, and if you need 15 million, you need to do something more.
Okay, good. One tip, ask your insurance guy about your insurance policy and read the small letters. Yes. Because we've had some really good surprises which were not insured. So if you're a security manager, know your insurance policy, because that's your biggest weapon you could use. Thanks everybody. Thanks Mike, Thomas, Eric and Ben. And
thank you very much, gentlemen, and special thanks to Bjorn as well for moderating that.